I am very excited to welcome back a past speaker, my good friend, Christine Merser. Christine is the founder of Blue Shoe, which is a marketing and social media strategy firm. She has run strategy campaigns for major national household names, like including political campaigns and a number of name brand companies. I'll let her decide which campaigns she wants to tell you about. Christine has recently been writing extensively and quite eloquently on the subject of how social media is evolving and what the impact that it's having on our society. And so I read her blog faithfully and realized that we had a topic here that no technology discussions are complete without. So we are thrilled to have Christine here to talk about this, and she will be giving us her thoughts and hopefully instilling us with some new thoughts on how to think about social media and where it is headed, because a lot of where it is headed is currently flying under the radar for many people. Now, I will say a couple things. First of all, Christine is not known for being shy. So I do, as Bert pointed out, expect a lively a lively discussion. I'm going to wrap up this intro with something that Christine taught me a long time ago about marketing. She said when she uses this expression, when you are marketing, you have to start realizing that people don't care about you. People care about themselves. And when you look at Christine's website, she really walks that walk, because her website is not about Christine. It is about what Christine believes in and how that can benefit her customers. So I am going to ask Christine to violate that rule for a brief moment and give us just a little bit of background on who Christine is and how you came to be where you are now, before you launch into your PowerPoint, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I did not expect that, but good morning, everyone. I am Christine Merser, and I am the founder of Blue Shoe, and we have worked on amazing work over the years. I started the company in '92. I've worked on Jeb Bush's campaign. I did the social media for Barack Obama, 2008. We did the first Olympic website that was ever done in the 90s. And so I've had a long history online and watching it grow and change and everything else. But enough about me, because today I'm learning as much as everybody else is. And I went back and looked. I spoke here 4 years ago. And I spoke on social media and why everybody needed to be in it and use it, et cetera. And there was a really lively discussion then where people were, sort of pushing back a bit. And all I can think about is, God, life was so much easier 4 years ago than it is now. And the topic today has such a larger impact in everybody's life and in the future of everything. So as I was putting it together, I couldn't help but be struck by the enormity. And for me, as I was doing a little more research, I've talked on this topic before, but for me, it was what to leave out rather than what to add in. There's so much information out here. So for example, when I talk about, I could have done the entire day on artificial intelligence. I mean, the entire presentation, but I didn't feel like that was going to give us a broad scope to discuss and lead from. So if you have a question along the way when I'm speaking, please put it in the comments. And then Robin will interrupt me and say, hey, we've got a question, because I think the more dialogue that takes place, the better. But I'm going to now attempt with great anxiety, sharing my screen and putting my presentation up. And you'd think, since I'm speaking on this topic, I would be more proficient, but alas, I am not. So hold on, bear with me, please. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the topic today is ethics around technology. So I feel like we have to do a little history and a little background first. So let's start with Albert Schweitzer's quote, which for me is really what drives me when I write about this topic. And he said the first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with other human beings. Okay, now because I know I don't belong on the same page with Albert Schweitzer, I put my name really tiny underneath it. I just want you to know I don't hold any sense that I am anywhere near in that level. But in my mind, never before in the history of the world has humankind had such a different sense of what is right and what is wrong. And so, how do we then work with Schweitzer's definition of how ethics can evolve if we don't have that same sense of solidarity? So I just put that in your mind as a beginning. Okay, and then we have to, of course, address the definition. You know, well-founded standards of right and wrong. I mean, those are the kinds of words when you put them together that you don't know how to translate them into your everyday life. And ethics consists of the standards of behavior in our society that our society accepts. And so for me, ethical and technology will be a moral relationship that exists between technology and its users. And that's we the people. So from my perspective, not to be confused with yours, but from my perspective, I believe that it's not the government, it's not the corporations, and we're going to walk through what's going on with all that stuff a little bit later, but it's really going to be each individual who will be the determining factor as to whether there are in fact ethics around technology or not. But let's go back to Ford. I guess what I wanted to show here is this has always been an issue. This is not the issue we're facing with ethics and technology. With any development of a new thing that happens in the world, there are huge ethics around it. And when the first Model T Ford hit the market, so no one was trained in how to drive cars, and apparently it wasn't pretty. People were dying, horses were dying. I mean, it was not okay. And there were more people likely to die or be injured when the Model T first came out than now. Now, when you consider the fact of how many cars are now here versus then, you can say that's quite an interesting statistic. And part of the reason that statistic changed was because people understood that there was a problem and that there needed to be parameters set to keep everyone safe. And so you had the government and you had the Ford company itself stepping forward and coming up with ways to make everybody safer, which we can show based on those numbers did work. So we had seatbelts and we had traffic laws and we had safer roads, and they put in lights, which, there was no need for a stop sign, way back when. So those things were put in. But then if you go back to my premise of everybody needs to be on the same page of what's right and what's wrong, everybody was back then. So the government, which was elected by we the people, wanted everybody to be safe on the roads. And Ford Motor Company wasn't paying the people in Washington and helping them get elected and helping them fill their own personal coffers. And so there wasn't the same sense of conflict of interest that there is now. So the Ford Motor Company, by the way, it happened with television, it happened with radio, it happened when the printing press came out. There were all kinds of things that started happening where people were putting out erroneous information and all kinds of things, and then they started to put things around it. So I think the other issue that we have to talk about is when Ford was designing the Model T, just like when the Wright brothers were making airplanes, he didn't sit there and go, okay, well, what could go wrong? What bad things could happen from this car? He was so excited about what he was creating that that's not the way people who build things think. They don't start from a premise of what terrible can happen. They might start from a premise of what might get in the way of what I want to build, but they don't start from a preference of what could this mean for society itself. So what we then need to do is we need to go to the most pressing ethical issues, because that's what we hope the conversation will be about today. Okay, so the first one is misuse of personal information. Okay, anybody want to even comment on the enormity of that issue? Is that somebody beeping to speak maybe or something? Okay, so
No.
yeah, we have to keep in mind that personal information now is the new gold. I mean, we've never commoditized data the way we are now, because it never had the value that it never has, that it now has. So the data now has a value to any company to build something. When I'm working with when I'm buying Google buys, and I go into Google and I talk about how can I get the biggest return on value for my money, the information that they've gathered will give me that. So this is the first time in history the data is so critical to your success in the dollars you use to win money. That's, there's no question that that's true. So the misuse of personal information is inherent in a company like a Google or a Facebook's what they're built on in terms of how they're going to make money. So that starts with the misuse of personal information. Okay, and then we talk about misinformation and deep fakes. Okay, you don't need me to explain to you what's going on with misinformation. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you sit on, misinformation is literally everywhere. But the one that I think we could talk about today a little bit is video, because seeing is believing. That's ingrained in our brain in a DNA that goes back so long. It's going to be very difficult to change our ability to understand that I can now see a video of somebody saying something and it's just not true. They didn't say it. It's not really them. And so the misinformation and deep fakes, in my mind, is going to move away from the printed word. And it's much more so going to be sitting in video. And that's the question that needs to be debated in terms of what should the ethics around that be. Okay, and then we have the lack of oversight and responsibility. Here's the thing, most companies, they farm out a good chunk of what they do. It's called hybrid stacking. And so if someone's running a campaign, if Bloomberg is running for president and he hires Blue Shoe, is he responsible for how I behave? Or am I responsible for how I behave? And because now more than ever before, companies are farming out a tremendous amount of what they do, then their feeling is, I'm not responsible if you take if the way you do your business is not in sync with the way you should do your business. So where does that responsibility lie? And I think that question is going to have to be answered by government and by business, and in the end, by we the people, which I hope to get to in short use of time. Okay, we've got to talk about the use of artificial intelligence. I'm doing a slide right after this one, which I added in yesterday, actually, because artificial intelligence to me is the biggest challenge that we're all going to face. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but okay, and then autonomous technology. This is about the robots. This is about technology that runs without oversight. So I guess the best example at this moment is the automatic cars. So Tesla's putting out their auto car, and the government is not overseeing it at all. We the people are not even overseeing it. So when people are going and wanting these cars and buying them, I did a data search to try to find out what kind of questions are they asking, and basically they're not. So if I decide, oh God, I want that car that drives automatically, I have a friend who got the Mercedes car that sort of drives automatically. Like you can put it on auto and you're still sitting in the seat, but it'll drive on the LIE straight ahead. You know, it won't get off at exit 5, but it will drive straight ahead. Okay, so, and I said to her, so I called her this week when I was putting all this together, which I should have done last week, I agree. But I said to her, what question did you ask? What do you mean? She had said, I asked how it worked. And I said, well, did you ask what could go wrong, or has this been tested? Well, no, I just assume that what I'm being sold does what it says it's going to do. Okay, that used to be true if you bought a radio. You turn the radio on, but there was no danger if you turn the radio on that you're going to kill the person in the kitchen. So the fact that there's not only no oversight, but that we, the consumers, are not asking the questions as we're purchasing this as to the dangers of purchasing it, I think is really interesting. I remember when I was really little, my aunt took my two sisters and me shopping in this department store, I think in Boston, and she said, you can pick out one thing. And I don't know why, because believe me, I never used it. I bought a thing that had all kinds of chemicals, and you could make things, smoke coming out of it, and anyway. And I said to her, I can, as we were leaving, I said, I can make fire with this. I was so excited. And she looked at me, she stopped, and she went back in, and she went up to the people, and she said to them, can she hurt herself with this? And then, they said no or whatever. I mean, moved on. Okay, we're talking, that was 63 years ago. I'm 69 years old. I was a kid. Okay, she knew enough to ask, but we're not asking questions at all at this point. So this autonomous technology becomes really, really mired in what are the ethical principles behind it. Okay,
Christine, could I interrupt there for a comment and maybe some response from you? Just looking here at your Ford analogy, I've often thought about social media and
sorry, which analogy? Which analogy?
Ford.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I have thought about, I hadn't thought about Ford, but I have thought about television. To me, the social media evolution is a lot, probably like what TV was when it first started. I remember as a child, a very small child, when subliminal advertising in television became a big thing and was finally banned. But early in television, of course, it was the Wild West. I mean, there were a few people who controlled the content, and they said whatever they wanted, and there wasn't any regulation. And over time, they realized that we shouldn't let advertisers sell cigarettes to children, et cetera. And they started to make rules. But I think that one of the big differences between cars and radio and television and social media is the level of complexity in the technology and the business models that these people are following that makes it difficult for average people to even know what the questions are to ask. To your point about your friend and the electric car, the automatic car. And I'm reminded of I believe it's called Parkinson's law of triviality, if you're familiar with that, which, there's the analogy of the nuclear power plant and the bicycle shed. And if people are in a meeting talking about nuclear power plants, everyone assumes that it's so complex and it's so above them that they trust that other people know better and they don't have opinions and questions. Whereas if they're building a bicycle shed, everyone understands that and starts to have opinions and questions. So what do you think about that when we're talking about your the campaign that you have been on to get people to take personal responsibility? How do they do that when so much of it feels out of their grasp?
Well, it's so funny because I want to give you a picture that went through my mind a couple of years ago. I saw Zuckerberg was testifying in front of Congress, and
I saw that too.
A lot of people.
Sadly.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have a close family member who works in Congress, and they have the Congress people have their 3 minutes, and they have two goals. One is to make the person they're questioning well, good or bad, depending upon their political point of view. And the second goal is to do a soundbite in a way that's going to give them media attention so that they become a known entity nationally when many of the Congress people are really much more localized. Okay. So I'm watching that. And with those two things in mind, I recognized that the problem wasn't even just that, which is usually the problem when Congress is doing hearings. It was that they had no idea how Facebook worked. And
They,
they
they
had no
clearly had no
idea.
idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
in other words, okay, so you're right. My premise and what I'm going to hopefully sort of pitch at the end of this is that none of this is going to be fixed by anybody other than us individually. So what I would say to you is, we have to choose what I call our posse around our watering hole. So if you're going to go buy a Tesla and and use that as the example, then your responsibility is to find the people who understand the technology in a way that you do not. And there are really easy ways to do that. And there are really good ways to do that. And the first thing is you always look at the source and make sure that it's a source you trust and you have a reason to trust. And if it's a new source that you don't know if you trust, you talk to the people in your posse at your watering hole that you do trust and say, do you know this source? Do I know that? In other words, I trust David Brooks, for example, to tell me the truth. I liked Nicole Wallace until I found out that she's been living with one of the people she has on her show every week for a couple of years, and now I don't know what that was about. Like, in other words, if you don't know, then your obligation to the ethics of the future of everything is to go find somebody who does, and then get the information you need to make a intelligent decision based on the input that you get from them. And it's not a perfect end, but it's better than what we've got now, because again, what they should have had was the government shouldn't have hearings where Congress people ask questions. They should have hearings where they bring in, where each side of Congress gets to bring in 3 specialists to ask questions of Zuckerberg, who understand Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg is the noun language, like he talks his own language. And, everybody thinks that, I don't think he's as Machiavellian as everybody else does. I think he's just damaged emotionally. So I have a whole different take on him. And I've met him and I've been around him a bit. So I have, I think a little bit of inside information. I don't know what the motivation on him is, but I can tell you he's often confused by what people are saying in the room because he doesn't speak their language. So I don't know, did that answer your question?
I'm not sure there is an answer to the question, but it certainly explored it. So I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Yeah, there isn't an answer to a lot of this, but we've got to start somewhere, and we've got to start on a road to where we want to go. So, okay, so, and then I would get to artificial intelligence, and I'm like, okay, whoa. Okay, so I did a lot of homework around this. So the first thing I want to talk about is the unemployment created by artificial, okay, I'm just going to give the example of truck drivers. There are millions of truck drivers in this country. Okay. Elon Musk has said within 10 years, he's going to have automatic trucks that drive automatically, which means they can drive 24 hours, which means they can deliver faster. It means they can be more efficient. The company won't pay as much because they won't have to pay all the labor that they're paying now. So millions of people will be out of jobs. So the technology for artificial intelligence creates a huge issue around what will happen to all those millions of people. Now, it turns out that I just saw some data, 78% of some of the jobs out there, such as truck drivers or assembly line people, things like that, they will be affected by artificial intelligence. The jobs, the labor jobs that are like on farms, things like that, might not be as much, but that's only 28%. So you're sitting there going, okay, what accommodation is going to be made? Because the next thing is, and I think it ties it all together, although I've never seen it written tying together, but the inequality of wealth that artificial intelligence will provide. So our economic system is based on compensation. So you are compensated for what you do. Okay. So if you cut down labor, there are huge profitability issues that company is going to make so much more money. If Ford Motor Company doesn't have to pay for its hundreds of, I don't know, thousands of, I don't know how many workers it has. Let me make that clear. If it doesn't have to have them anymore, then their profitability is infinitely higher. Will they keep that profitability, or will they pay it out or create jobs? In other words, what's the ethical responsibility for these companies to the people that were part of the entire combined relevancy of what they did? So get this. So I found out that the three biggest companies in Detroit, this is, by the way, it's a little old. It's from 2015, but I don't know if it's changed that much. But let's just go with it for the assumption here. The three biggest companies in Detroit and the three biggest companies in Silicon Valley had approximately the same revenues. But the three companies in Detroit had 10 times the three companies in Silicon Valley had 10 times fewer employees. So their cost factor to do business was substantially lower. That means their profitability is substantially higher. Okay, that's part of the issue around this, and I think it can't be ignored. Okay, the next thing we have to talk about is humanity. So has anybody ever heard of the Turing challenge? Does anybody know that challenge? I can't see you, so.
No, we're
Okay.
seeing
Yes,
no.
I have, Christine. It's Bert.
Oh, hi, Bert. Do you wanna, just to give me a break to have a sip of water, do you wanna lay out what it is?
Uh, from my understanding, it's basically if you're having an interaction, a blind interaction with a person or some sort of artificial intelligence, and that if you can't tell whether it's a human or not, then then at that point the artificial intelligence has essentially become human. Am I close?
That's so, yeah. Oh, but unfortunately, you don't know it. Okay,
Right.
here's what happened. The Turing Challenge every year, they bring in, I don't know how many people, and they have you have conversations with on a telephone, and then you're asked, was this a robot or was this a human? Okay, 2015 was the first year where people got it wrong more than 50% of the time. And it's been going up since because we're getting better at creating bots that you can't discern between the two. Okay, what's the ethical situation around that? I think I'm having a conversation with the person, but I'm not. Okay, and so, you know, we call it's really stupid, it's really one of those situations where, you know, what are you going to do with that? Where's the humanity in the additional part of the conversation where you say to somebody, I really appreciate you taking this extra time. Or you know how sometimes you're on the phone with somebody for a really long time, when you're trying to get something done. I'm getting my hip replaced. Don't even ask the number of hours I've spent. And the person I'm talking to, she and I have become friends. I send her cookies,
Mm.
okay. That's part of our humanity. That's part of who we are as humans. That's part of the original thing of what kind of relationships do we want to have with people. Okay, where does the humanity go if you don't even know if you're talking to a real person or not? That's the ethical question in my mind there. Um, okay, and then we get down to artificial stupidity. So um, part of the problem with artificial intelligence is they're not always right. So I don't know, did everybody see that the IRS was going to make you log in by your facial recognition? Did anybody see that? I can't see you.
I
So,
did not
I
see
did see
that. I'm
that.
seeing no
okay,
responses.
and they had to cancel it because everybody went into a panic. You cannot get somebody on the IRS on the phone right now. And if it makes a mistake and doesn't recognize me, then I'm doomed, to say nothing of the fact that 6 months ago they were doing facial recognition, which is artificial intelligence, and people of color were being recognized when it wasn't them, and they were actually being arrested for crimes they didn't commit. And it was really hard to prove they didn't commit it. Okay, now to me, I started thinking about that and I was thinking, gosh, you know how people have identified people as the perpetrator in court and people have been given life sentences and then they realized it wasn't that person? Okay, talk about artificial intelligence. Like we don't get it right ourselves. So we don't get it right ourselves. So um, we don't get it right ourselves. So how can we expect that we can correct what goes wrong artificially? So there's the stupidity that we have to sort of address around that. Okay. And then we call it racist robots. I think that's a term I wish there was a different term for, but because if anybody wants to look it up or anything, you can check it out. But it's really where whoever's creating the robots, whatever bias you have, will be inside that robot as well because you can't keep it out. And most of us don't even know what our bias is. So we're not creating pure robots that can behave better than us. We're creating robots that are going to behave in a mirror-like image of us. And one of the things my company we propose is that people, you're right. I can't believe that's what you remember about what I tell you, Robin, but you're right. Nobody cares about you. They care about themselves. So, and in my defense, I just want to say that, how like you're on LinkedIn or whatever, and everybody's like, I am so grateful to have been given this honor. Okay. No one cares that you're grateful. They care about what kind of information you're giving them that's relevant to their lives. And also it's sort of that false humility of, whatever. So it's the same kind of situation where we have to recognize the limitations that we have to create the kind of artificial intelligence that we say we're creating, which is a much cleaner, purer, better way to do things. I'm not sure that that's true. Okay, and then there's the security of it, and I don't even need to address that because we all know that once it's out there, the ability to break in and take it and take the information from it or to change it is there. It's definitely there. And then we go to the evil creators. And, the example that was given to me a while ago was really scary. Basically, it said, so artificial intelligence is not wrong, but it can get really messed up. So if you said to the artificial intelligence, this is the example that I'm going to put on the table, you got to go cure cancer. And their answer back would be, okay, we've got a way to cure it 100%. Okay, what you didn't understand was their cure, which they're then asked to execute out, is to kill everybody on the planet. Because their thought process didn't take into, it's funny, not funny. Hashtag funny, not funny, right? It's like, okay, maybe the way they solve the problem is worse than the problem itself. And that could come up more and more often, especially as more and more things are turned over to them to fix and execute on their own. So it's not necessarily that there's evilness, but I think there is the other side of that. I think evil people will do evil things with it. But if we even leave that aside and say we can manage that, the ability for them to do bad or to do harm and not even realize it is certainly out there. Okay. Okay, so we're the top of the food chain because of our intelligence and our ingenuity. Okay. So once we create artificial intelligence, then we are putting that in that top of the food chain brilliance that we have, and we're giving it to something else. And then we might not be able to turn it off. So an artificial intelligence machine might consider, as it set up its security measures, oh, somebody could pull the plug if they were trying to steal it or what. Again, not with a bad intention. Okay, so you can pull the plug, but I'm not going to be turned off. In other words, it will be able to fix any issues that come up, which make it maybe smarter than us. And if something's smarter than us, then that doesn't mean necessarily it's going to be for the better for us. And then also, do robots have rights? can they feel? One of the things that the psychologists are starting to look at is if you're creating this intelligence at really the highest levels and it's getting better, better, better. So if someone I'm on a phone with who she's gonna schedule my hip replacement, if she's really empathetic with me, is she really empathetic? Or is she not? And they don't have the answer to that question yet. So it's certainly one of the ethical things that came out. So that's what I wanted to lay in front of you as all the issues that are surrounding the ethics around technology as I see them, not to be confused with other people. Okay, so then I went to, this is the part that's the scariest part of all. This is the part that makes me terrified. I read Harvard Business Review. I consider it to be part of my posse at my watering hole. And they put out an article, I think it was last year. It was not, I think it was November last year. Okay. So basically the premise of their article was that the companies that deliver technological advances need to act ethically. Okay. They need to anticipate and address the potential effects of technologies they deploy. Okay. This is their answer for how that would happen. They need to deal with ethics before there is an issue at inception. Okay. They need to, I'm going to go through them all and then I'll tell you how terrified I am. Involve outside specialists, pause and plan, assign accountability, appoint a chief tech ethics officer. Okay. What planet are they on? Really, seriously. Okay, appoint a chief tech ethics officer. We saw how that worked at Philip Morris. You know, when that ethics officer at Philip Morris was told, you're going to lose your job if you stop, if you put any of this information out about how serious cigarettes were. Assign accountability. Oh, you're accountable. Oh, that makes me accountable. No, that makes me still part of a team that's being paid for by one person or one company. Pause and plan. Oh, we've got to get this to market within the next year. I mean, I work in marketing. Time is of the essence. Time is our biggest enemy. Pause and plan. Nobody innovative creating pauses and plans. They just don't. And in today's world, with the expectation that we all have that things need to come to fruition quickly, not going to happen. Involving outside specialists, you're going to hire the specialists that are going to give you the go ahead to do what you want to do. If we've seen anything around COVID, we've seen that. Okay. And deal with the ethics before there is an issue at inception. And that goes back to the Ford thing of, I don't think great creators come from a negative point of view, because if they started when they were creating things to think of all the things that could go wrong, then they might not do it. So dealing with the ethics of it beforehand is putting cogs in the wheel of success. And I don't think you can expect companies to do any of the 5 points that the Harvard Business Review's research put together for how to fix the responsibility of creators. And the fact that it comes from a periodical that I happen to think is smart. And it didn't even once address, I read it, I looked through it twice. Okay, it's really long, but it didn't even deal with the fact that all of these things were conflicts of interest, every single thing that they put out. So that leads me to the last thing that I wanted to put for you before we started to have a conversation, is that I have been saying for a number of years, when people are, because I'm in the industry, people will be like, well, Facebook, and I said, look, don't put anything up on Facebook you don't want the world to know. If you don't want somebody to be on the front page of the New York Times, don't put it out there. Do it on a phone call with your friend, but do not. The personal information that you put online, you should assume is going to go a lot of places. If you do that, then they can't hurt you. If you take misinformation and you decide that what you read, what you forward, what you believe, you are going to take responsibility for its accuracy, then you're going to do better and the whole world will do better. For example, and I told people this, it doesn't matter which side of the political fence you sit on. It turns out that the New York Times, for example, when Hillary was running for president, They put out about her emails 17 times more articles about her emails than the issues that the campaigns were based on. So education, healthcare, things like that. 17 times more articles. Okay, if it had just been print and no internet, that wouldn't have happened. The reason it happened is because we, the people, if you don't like Hillary Clinton, you click on that because it sends a serotonin message to your brain that makes you a happy person for 5 minutes. Okay. So if you're somebody who was against Trump, the reason Trump got all that play is because people clicked on it. It made money for all of those networks, including left-wing networks or whatever. So if you don't click on things that really you want, you can stop, you can pause for a moment and say to yourself, am I doing this because they lured me in, or am I clicking on it because it's new information that I think I want to know? And every time I do that, most likely I save myself some time and I move to the next item. So I see so many of my friends, intelligent, smart, wonderful people, putting up information that is not accurate. And then sometimes they'll put it up and say, I saw this. Does anybody else see this? And do you think it's true? What? Find out if it's true and then post it. But by putting it up that way, you're saying, you're putting it out there. Your friends are going to click on it. Their friends are going to click on it. The algorithms of Facebook are going to say, oh, that's an interesting topic. And they're going to give it more reach on more people's feeds. And people are going to make more money because you clicked on it. And they're going to say, okay, it doesn't matter. The company's going to say, well, we're making money on that. We're going to keep going with that. And they're going to assign another reporter to write more about that topic. If we want to clean up misinformation, it's not going to be done at government level. It's not going to be done at the corporate level. It's going to be done at we the people level, in my opinion. I have spent the last 3 years, and Robin knows this, and so do a number of other people on this call, where I very politely put up the same thing when someone does that. I checked this for you. It is not accurate. I hope you'll take it down. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes they delete my comment. That's interesting. Okay, I'm just saying, again, each of us is responsible. And if we're all on the same page, if we go back to the beginning of what I said, of what Schweitzer said, if we're all on the same page in terms of what we believe and what we want our world to be, then we the people can change that, because each individual person can. Now, artificial intelligence, I think this is the one that's, I think, really hard. And I don't think we the people can fix this, because it's out there. It's not going to go away. Okay, I don't understand it well enough, nor will I ever. I don't have the IQ to deal with this and to figure out what is right and what is wrong. But if I'm going to go buy a car that uses artificial intelligence, I promise you, I'm going to ask the questions of what can go wrong. The other thing is, now a couple of times I've been on a phone call with somebody and I'm thinking, is this person real? So I've said, excuse me, are you a real person or a bot? I have said it. Now, it's not, nobody's answer. They've all been real people. But again, we can decide we want to know. We can say, we're not using that company because they're not telling us. We can say to the people we elect for office, I want a law to say at the beginning of any call, this call is being handled by a robot. We can determine the safeguards that are put on there. Now, we used to depend on the government to do that, and we used to depend on the integrity of the companies to do that. We can debate from now to ad infinitum which companies have integrity and which ones do not. The bottom line is, you should assume they don't. So therefore, we can demand that they have safeguards put in place to do it. Now, will they lie about it? Probably, but there are always people inside any company that tell the truth. So I think the only way we can go is to say, I am responsible. I am not going to put that responsibility on the shoulders of others. And then on autonomous technology, we provide the market, not the inventor. So if you don't want cars to be driven I remember 20 years ago, I used to imagine, I drove a lot from Nebraska to New York because I went to the University of Nebraska and I would drive, to New York for the summers. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was a conveyor belt and you just got on the conveyor belt and I could go all the way across Interstate 80 and I could get off when I wanted to. I saw it as a conveyor belt. I never saw it as someone driving my car. Okay, maybe the dream we had was bigger than the reality we should be living in. So I do believe that our hope, and that's why I was so excited to sort of lay some things in front of you today. I believe that the hope in the future of what we're going to do will be determined by us individually, and that we do have the power. And that's an exciting prospect. So that's what I leave you with in terms of what could happen next. So that's my presentation. Anybody have anything they want to talk about?
I'd like to chime in for a minute if I could, please.
Sorry.
So thank you. I'd like to say thank you for your presentation. Found it very interesting. I am a victim of change. You talked about the way the world would change if all the robots took over the trucks. Okay, so I'm an old printing press operator. When the internet came into place, millions and millions of people in the printing industry were displaced. You were forced to change because of technology. So some people think technology is not a good thing. Myself, I learned to adapt and change and be positive with the change. I think what you're saying is very true. It's up to the individual to be honest with themselves, and then they can be honest with other people. So the world I'm in now is called home inspections, and we have a standards of codes and ethics to be honest with ourselves and with the people that we work with. So I've learned quite a bit in the last 20 years of change. I'm all new to this technology, but every day is a new experience, and I'm grateful to be here. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Brian. That's sweet of you to say. Before we started, Jennifer, you're still here, right? Is Jennifer Reed still here? I wrote her name down.
Yeah, she's still here.
Yeah, it was funny because you brought up such a great topic of right this minute in time. Can you just tell everybody what you were asking about at the beginning before everybody came in?
Oh, sure. I was just saying that on the way to work this morning, I listened to the New York Times Daily podcast, and they covered, the Joe Rogan Experience Spotify controversy, and I can pop it in the chat when I'm done talking. They did a very great in-depth analysis of him from the point of view of one of their reporters who has listened to him for years and years, and talked about sort of how he presents himself as sort of a bro, a dude who's curious, and that he's not part of the mainstream, but they offer a critique that, this is becoming, or it is more and more the mainstream, this sort of the people that fight and want to be part of this like critique of mainstream media are in fact now have audiences that are, killing the mainstream media. So I'll pop that in the chat. I highly recommend listening to it. I don't think I can do a great job at synthesizing all the nuance of the conversation, but it's definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Now I'm also going through the comments section. So, and I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that came up. Do I have comments about CRSPR, the gene editing technology? Personally, I see a minefield of issues on the table. Okay, that's Steve Tom who put that out. And I just want to say, I'm not smart enough to understand gene editing technology. I know a lot about social media, but that's about it. But, but again, doesn't gene editing come down to we the people deciding how we want our ethics and our morals and how we want to live our life? And are we all on the same page? I don't know.
Christine, let me ask you something I'd like to touch on, because we're coming up on 9 o'clock. So the first question is, do you have time to stay a little overtime? Because obviously we're going overtime.
Of course.
Okay, great. So everyone's welcome to stay on. Um, and I wanted to touch on the piece that you wrote about the Zuckerberg's vision of community, and what the meta might mean in the Zuckerberg world for the future, because I'm not sure, I certainly was not paying attention to this before I saw your post. So I wonder if you could give people a little overview of that and what your thoughts are about the implications.
I think people are missing the point. It was my point with that, is everybody is focused on him being this terrible human being. Well, first of all, I think he's damaged by the fact that he was constantly an outsider, and all Zuckerberg has ever wanted to be is at the party and a cool guy at the party. By the way, it's never going to happen, but that's what he wanted. So when he started Facebook, it was in reaction to being left out of the party. And then when it took off like that, he felt like he was at the party, and then he still wasn't at the party. So Meta, from his point of view, has nothing to do with trying to take over the world in this Darth Vader mentality. It's trying to make sure that he's at the party. And so what happens is, if you look at what Meta is, if people understand Meta comfortably, then you'll know that it's about an artificial world, and being in it. And he wants to own that world. And the question is, artificial worlds are something I think people should determine personally whether they want to be. Now, I know that there are people in wheelchairs who can't leave their homes, who live amazing lives in an artificial world. They have friends, they are somebody. I had a friend of mine from out in the Midwest, and her husband, it was a really hardworking major guy in their family. He did incredible things with their family. And then she found out he had spent their entire, all of their savings to play this game. And when she sat down with him, great guy, he said, in this family, I'm nobody. I just bring home the bread and I mow the lawn. But there, I'm somebody. I'm a captain. And he had found a world where he was more highly thought of. And so if you think of Meta as something that's a choice by every individual, we the people, then you're also going to be able to decide whether you want to be part of that or not. And if the majority of people on Earth decide they want to live in a meta universe, then no one's going to change their mind. But I believe that the human interaction physically is so critical to the world, but for some people it's not. So if you take that judgment out, and you also recognize that if whatever groups you join in the meta universe, whatever you do, all of that will determine who's going to make money. You should know, if you give money to anybody or any company, you should know what it is you're giving to. I very much spend my money based on my politics. Okay, some people do, some people don't. But I don't think anybody should be worried about Zuckerberg in terms of how he was trying to hide from what was happening in Facebook. Everybody was like, first of all, his Meta company has been in the works for 10 years. There's no way he just came up with that in response to the fact that he's in trouble in Facebook. The second thing is, he's not in trouble in Facebook. It doesn't matter if Facebook loses 29% of its value to Zuckerberg. It doesn't matter. So what we're focused on, oh, he's hiding from Facebook, is the wrong focus. The focus should be on the meta world and deciding now what we, the people, want to do about it before it's too late, before it's too far gone, before it's too big to be able to manage. So that was my basic premise.
Do you think that the meta should be, do you think that we should be looking at it the way we look at substance abuse, for example?
Well, I don't know,
I mean, for someone to spend his life savings, that's, I equate that to somebody who maybe has a gambling addiction, right? and he's gone and spent all his money. He's addicted to this game now. And what happens when the people who run the game, they almost have the ability to charge whatever they want at this point because the person can't stop. And that feels like something that should be regulated the same way things like gambling and other addictive substances are.
Well, here's the thing with that. This is where, the older I get, the less judgmental I get. I'm more opinionated, surprisingly, but less judgmental. The guy never felt this good. Isn't he entitled to some joy in his life? So
Does he feel good that he's broke?
I know, but what he was trying to say to his significant other is, I felt like I was somebody for the first time in my life. Okay, it's hard to judge that harshly in that same way, in my opinion. So I come from a place of, maybe the problem is it shouldn't cost that much to do it. And maybe they're, in other words, maybe the problem is the money part behind it. And so if everybody who plays that game said, we're not going to allow you to charge us $200 a week anymore, or we're not going to play, we're going to go somewhere else, and you get somebody else to develop it in a nonprofit or something. If somebody wants to live in a meta world and have a different kind of life than I choose to have, I can't take that away from them. I don't believe I have the right, because again, we the people is an individual choice. But at the same time, I do think that there are ways that people can band together at their watering hole. If I were working with him, if they brought me in to strategize with him, I would say, let's see if we can find a way to let everyone in the game know that this is making people bankrupt, and let's find a cheaper way to do it. That's what I would do.
Okay, and that is going to lead me to another question that comes from one of your blogs. And I'm sorry if I'm going to put you on the spot with this one, because the blog ended with a cliffhanger. And this is your discussion about how we might break up with Mark Zuckerberg. Your piece, Breaking Up with Facebook, you suggest that word of mouth outside of the platforms from hell that are destroying our nation, that is a quote, could be the way forward. And the piece ended with a stay tuned. Just wondering if you've got anything to add to that yet.
We went to our clients, Blue Shoe, my company, went to our clients, and we decided we're not going to give him that money. And we've developed other avenues, which I can't prove are working as well yet. I mean, I wrote that a couple months ago, and it was sort of our goal. One of the goals at my company for 2022 is to come up with new ways to accomplish the same situation in marketing without putting money where I don't want it to go. And so, again, with Spotify, which is such a great example, Jennifer, so thanks for bringing it to the table. I'm not going to use Spotify for my podcasting anymore. And it's not that I don't think Rogan has the right to say whatever he wants. I think that Spotify has a list of rules, which is why people chose to be on that platform. And he's the only one who doesn't have to adhere to them. Until they make him adhere to those rules, I won't use it anymore. Okay, again, that's we, the people, having the ability to do that. So yes, we have made changes. I would say that our investment in Facebook is probably 60% less than it was last year already, same time.
Okay, and can we look for some more advice on that coming in your blog sometime soon?
Yes, you can.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we are going to start to move towards wrapping up here, and I think I'd like to give the last question to Ed, because he is asking a good wrap-up question about advice. Ed, do you mind unmuting and stating your question? Ed Klein?
I think he had to drop. He had to go. But here's what.
Okay, well then let's let me read his question. All right, so this is Ed asking, thanks, Christine, great presentation. Any advice for we the people that don't see progress in ethical behavior from our personal actions? Any suggestions for channeling our concerns?
Yes, I think that we the people have to enlist other we the people to join the we the people power base. When I talk to people, when I see somebody do something that's outside the wheelhouse of what I think is in their best interest or mine, and I talk to them about it, they're like, well, I don't have any agency here. What I say is not going to matter. Okay, my answer is if each one of us went and found 50 people to be part of We the People where we take responsibility, then we can change it. And so if you aren't seeing change by your ethics, then you could ask people who are at your watering hole, who you see behaving in a different way, or even not, to say, hey, why don't we all take responsibility and not click on this? Or why not? We have to talk about this issue, and we have to verbalize to our friends and family and posse. We have to verbalize our intention. So we dropped a couple clients last year for that very reason. I'm not going to play in that sandbox that you want us to be in. So, I think it can make a difference. I don't know how long it will take, but if it becomes a movement, I think it can really, really take off. And I certainly know that my posse and my watering hole has definitely changed their opinions over the last couple of years based on this stuff. So I hope anybody could reach out. Happy to help anybody with anything they want to do that would move this position forward.
Okay, Christine, last word. Anything you'd like to tell us that we haven't covered?
No, I wish there could be another conversation where I'm not laying out groundwork and we really took some of those issues and everybody on here debated them, because I think people have things to say. It's a question of having the wherewithal to say it. So I think if you could do some open forums about ethics in technology, and where it's like one topic and everybody comes on an equal basis to talk about it, I'd love to moderate that, and I think it would be amazing.
Well, that is a terrific idea, and we will discuss that immediately. For now, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. It has been a pleasure, and it has been eye-opening as always, and it's great to see you.
Thank you for your time, everyone. I really appreciate you coming.